Good morning students. Let's continue with Agile software development. So in the last lecture we have seen that Agile is an incremental development method that focuses on rapid development, frequent releases of the software, reducing process overheads and producing a high quality code. So we were stressing on the code. Overhead like preparing extra documents are not mandatory here, right? But what is important is customer is directly involved in the development process, and if we follow all these, ultimately customer will be more satisfied because all his requirements are properly implemented, as well as the extra overhead is reduced and it produces a high quality software, right? Now, which approach to use? The very basic question that comes into our mind. The decision on whether to use an agile or a plan-driven approach. It actually depends upon the software, the type of software being developed, the capabilities of the development team members, and the culture of the company developing the system. So three basic criteria that has to be considered. First is the type of software. That means if it is a medium and a small scale, we can go for agile, and if customer is committed, then also we can go for an agile, else we go for plan driven approach. Then the capabilities of the development team member. Now we know that in agile we just have lesser members, maybe like it's a pair. Actually we'll see in the method now, extreme programming, the team members are in pairs, that is 2 along with 1 customer. So see, we just have limited team members, so they must be skilled enough in their task or the activity they are supposed to do, right? So ultimately the capability of the development team member matters a lot here, as well as the culture of the company developing the team. The culture of the company is, like you can see, up till now, since long decades, the culture is that you have to develop the software systematically using phase development approach, that is SDLC. Now instantly you say now leave that approach and you switch to agile, which is not at all systematic. So it's very difficult for a person who was working for 50-60 years using phase development approach. His mindset was that the culture of the company and everything was established as per phase development approach, and we are asking him to change everything. So it's not practically possible. It's not a matter of just few seconds, right? So you have to take care each and everything into consideration before identifying which method will be best suited for that particular problem. Now coming up to the methods of agile, we have seen that we have two methods of agile. One is an extreme programming and second one is an scrum. So today we will be discussing about extreme programming. Extreme programming is also called as XP. So it is denoted X capital while P is capital, uppercase, right? So the name I have written in such a way that signifies this XP. Now what is this extreme programming? It's a well-known agile method that integrates a range of good programming practices such as frequent releases of the software, continuous software improvement, and customer participation in the development team. So ultimately the base is same as that of agile, that you develop the software in increments. So while you're developing a software in increments or iteration, you are delivering the software in increments only, or in iteration, that is frequent releases are being given to the customer now and then. Now that depends upon how much time it takes. So agile normally it takes 2 to 4 weeks to deliver a iteration, so we will be giving iteration. But extreme is something, I'll tell you what is this frequent releases here means is a number of releases can be given in a day itself in case of extreme programming. Then continuous software improvement in the form of refactoring the code. We have seen that in the agile principle, that is maintain simplicity, we have to restructure the code again and again to make it simple, so that there is a future scope of making more changes. So that concept is known as refactoring the code. So refactoring signifies the continuous process improvement or the software improvement. And lastly, customer participation in the development team. So that is mandatory in case of agile. Customer will be a part of the team itself. So this is what the basic of an agile. Now look into the details. So this is the best known and most widely used agile method. Now extreme programming takes an extreme approach to iterative development. So I said if iteration is good, then we will be using this iteration to the maximum extent. Now what is that maximum extent? New versions may be built several times per day. It's not that you will wait for 2 to 4 weeks. If minor changes are there, then the new versions or the releases can be given multiple times in a single day itself. Or increments are delivered to customer every 2 weeks. Minimum is 2 weeks, maximum is 4 weeks, right? So a major change can be delivered in 2 to 4 weeks, while simple ones can be delivered multiple times in a day. Then all tests must run for every build, and the build is only accepted if test runs successfully. So we know that whenever you build something, you have to test it properly, right? So if it is tested properly, then only it can be delivered and it will be accepted by the customer. So you have to run test. What is test? We are talking about the test data or the test inputs that you have identified. You have to execute all those test data on the build you have developed, and if it is successful, then only it will be accepted. Now, how does agile principles are accommodated in extreme programming? So we knew that agile principles are incremental development, customer involvement, people not process, embrace change, and maintain simplicity. So these 5 principles of agile are implemented in extreme programming. How? Incremental development is supported through small, frequent system releases. So we know that extreme programming, we used to give number of releases in the day. So that means incremental development is applicable in XP. Then customer is involvement means full-time customer engagement with the team for providing the requirement, for prioritizing the requirement, and then evaluating the build or the iteration that you have developed. The customer is throughout involved in XP. People not process is supported through pair programming, collective ownership, and a process that avoids long working hours. So what do you mean by this? People not process. That means you focus on the people rather than the process. Now how people is important? Here the concept of pair programming is applicable. Pair programming means the development team member works in pairs. That means the team will consist of 2 members only, randomly selected from a mass of people, right? So that you are in a situation to cooperate and collaborate with different team members on different projects, and you work together in a 2. Why just 2? Why we are calling it as a pair? If you do something individually, maybe you're not excel in everything. No one is perfect, right? Maybe you know one thing properly, but you lack something or the other, right? But if you have, so individually if you are doing work, maybe will not do it properly because might be some cons are there, right? You are not excel in everything. But if you have more than 2 members, in that case it might happen that there are some ego issues, or you can say misunderstanding about the team members, and ultimately it is going to hamper the work done. But if you just have 2 members, the optimum 2 members, then what will happen in this case? Both are going to collectively work together so that whatever work you do is successful, right? You have you are focused, you have a aim, you work according to that only. But the question will be, why these 2 people are not going to fight with each other? Why there is least possibility of having misunderstanding among 2? It might happen between 2 people also, if it can happen, and more than 2 people also. But in order to support this, we have collective ownership. Collective ownership means both the people are equally responsible for anything that goes correct or if anything goes wrong in the project, right? So when both are equally responsible, so what will happen? You know that if anything goes correct, both will be credited. If anything goes wrong, I cannot say that he did that or she did that, right? I know that we both will be blamed for that or punished for that, right? So ultimately, when we knew the collective ownership is there, so those 2 people are going to work in cooperation and collaboration towards the successful completion of the project, because they both are responsible. So they are not going to leg pull each other. They will be focused and work towards their aim. and a process that avoids long working hours, right? So this method, that is extreme programming, doesn't want the people to sit for long hours and work. What happens normally in a project is, say a project deadline is approaching, right, and you're left with very less time. Say you're supposed to deliver it on a coming Saturday, but the work is lagging behind. You have to complete your work. So the alternative is, we'll sit long hours, maybe 18 to 22 hours in a day, just to finish our work as per the guideline or the deadline available, right? But what will happen if you're going to, now, earlier you were just sitting for 4 or 5 hours, and now you're giving 20 or 22 hours in a day. What will happen? It is going to hamper your health, right? This, you are going to sleep less, you will be in a stress, you will be exhausted. So ultimately it is going to affect your health conditions in a long run. So this method says, extreme programming says, never work for long hours. There must be a sustainable work. Sustainable means, say if you have assumed that you are supposed to complete your work in 2 months, so it says from the very first day, you just, if it is required you must work for 8 hours in a day, so from the very first day work for 8 hours. So it won't be that you have to sit for long hours at the end. But in SDLC what happened, we knew that we can complete our work by sitting for 8 hours, but initially we take it lightly. We knew that 2 months are there, for 10 days or 15 days or 20 days we won't work at all. We take it lightly, and when the deadline is approaching, then we sit for long hours. Like you can assume during our exams we sit for long hours, while during the semester, when the semester starts, we never study at all. You can compare it this way. So when you are sitting for long hours during your examination, so you come in a stress condition, right? Stress is there, so health is ultimately gets interrupted, you get headache or whatever it is, so it might happen. So this extreme programming says, avoid long working hours, it must be a sustainable development only, right? Then embrace change is supported through frequent releases. If you're giving new release, that means some change has been implemented. Else why you're going to give a new release? Release is only given when some minor or major, a change is there, right? So change is accommodated by these frequent releases. Then maintain simplicity through refactoring the code. So I told you refactoring is restructuring the code again and again as and when you make any change. So these 5 principles of Agile are applicable in extreme programming also. Now what is extreme programming release cycle? How does it work? The process. Now make one thing clear, we are using a term here as user stories. So what are user stories? User stories are nothing, they are the requirements. In SDLC we call them as requirements, so while in Agile we call them as user story. So one and the same thing only. So what we do is, say we have number of user stories, that means number of requirements to be implemented. Like in a library automation system, creation is one user story, deletion is another user story, search is another user story, issue is a user story, return, reissue, all these are user stories. That means the requirements. So it says that select the user story for this release. That means for the current iteration, identify which user story you are going to develop first, right? Identify this. Now break down these stories into tasks. Now it might happen that user story or a requirement has multiple functionality. So it says that break it down into task and subtask. Keep on dividing it, right? Until unless you get a subtask which can be implemented in 2 to 4 weeks, right? So you have to break down till the point you are in a condition to deliver an iteration in 2 to 4 weeks. Keep on dividing it, right? So break down the user story into task. Plan a release. A bit of planning is required, not an extensive planning. Planning is simply this user story. That means from this user story, a particular task is selected now to be delivered or developed in the current iteration. That is simply the planning. Now, development, integration and test are interleaved here. You know that we don't carry out separately, they are combined, right? So you develop, that means code it, integrate it with the previous one, because you are giving releases in iteration, so you have to integrate the current iteration with the previous iteration also, right? So integrate it and then test the software whether they are working properly or not. Release the software to the customer, evaluate the system. While you release it, then customer is going to evaluate it. Once it is done properly, if customer is happy with that or he asks for a modification, so that modified can be developed in the next iteration. Or if is satisfied, then you can select the another user story or the subtasks to be developed in the next iteration, and you keep on repeating this cycle. So this is what extreme programming release cycle is, and it continues for a long time. Now, principles or practices which are important, just quickly describing it. Incremental planning is there. Requirements are recorded as on story cards, and the story to be included in a release are determined by the time available and their relative priority. The developers break these stories into development tasks, no problem. Small releases, we know that the minimum useful set of functionality that provides business value is developed first. That means we get it prioritized by the customer. The core ones are released in the first one, right? Then simple design. Enough design is carried out to meet the current requirement and no more. So elaborated designing is not done. Just for the current iteration, you can simply plan and design it. Now, one thing is very important here is test first development. Now, what do you mean by test first development? The name suggests is first test and then develop. See the opposite. In the SDLC, we have seen that first we code and then we test. But this method says just opposite. First test and then code. That is develop, right? So what is the benefit of this? I'll give you a practical example. Say in a semester, as soon as your new semester starts, the normal approach that is taken up by your faculty member is he or she comes to the class. Let's say I take an example of software engineering. I come to the class and I started with unit 1. I take each topic one by one, then unit 2, then unit 3, 4, 5, and then you give your exams. Maybe after 2 units you have a midterm also. So this is what a systematic approach, that the syllabus is taken up unit by unit and then you give the exam. So what happens in this is, though we understood everything properly, right, but when exam approaches we get confused. Maybe the syllabus or the content is too much, or we're not able to identify what is important, what to study and what to leave, right? So normally we ping the faculty member, please tell the important things or give us an assignment so you can make out an idea, or you refer the previous year question papers, but still there is a confusion in our mind, right? Though we study everything, but everything gets mingled up. So this is what a normal approach is. But if I take the test first development approach, a faculty comes to your class and on the first day he or she gives you a test of that subject which he or she is going to take, right? Now we knew that it's a new subject in the semester, you have not done prior to that, and you're supposed to give the test, a basic test only. You attempt it. So how much you are going to score? Very less, because it's a new subject. Just the common knowledge can be applied and you can mark the answers or a guess will work, right? But you don't have the thorough knowledge or understanding of that particular topics that you're marking. But what will happen in this way, when you are attempting that test, so one thing is clear in your mind, that we don't know anything, or these type of questions comes in exam from XYZ topic, or what are the important topics, right? Unit is very long, but important ones are very less. So you get an idea that what are the important topics, how the questions are being put up, and where we actually stand, how much we know as of now. So from that you can identify कि क्या आता है, क्या नहीं आता, और कैसे आपको प्रोसीड करना है सब्जेक्ट को फर्दर, राइट? सो दिस इज व्हाट टेस्ट फर्स्ट डेवलपमेंट इज. So once you give the test, you conclude that whatever you know and what is left. So when the subject starts in the class, so your mindset is clear. Okay, fine, these are the important topics, I have to listen carefully or I have to understand it properly because the questions are put up in this way. इस टॉपिक से इंटरनल क्वेश्चंस आते हैं, इससे सिर्फ सुपरफिशियल क्वेश्चंस आते हैं, राइट. दीज आर द सो मेनी थिंग्स you have to take care, right? And this topic I know, this topic I don't know. So accordingly you have a plan in your mind how to proceed and accordingly you work, and when then exam starts, you're in a better position, you have a better understanding of the concepts, you have taken care ki which one to give importance and which one to leave, and then you attempt the exam. It's always a better one. Similarly is a case with software development. So what happens in agile or extreme programming method is we simply write a template of the code and we test it. It's a blank template only, right? A template जहाँ पे सिर्फ मेजर आपके template से internal coding नहीं है, right? You test it, it will give n number of errors because nothing is there. आपने header file ली है लेकिन code के अंदर कुछ भी नहीं है. Like if a C example, right? Or you haven't initialized the variable, you haven't used any processing step, you haven't output anything, तो सारी errors आ जाएगी. Now when you have lot many errors in front of you and then you are supposed to start coding, so you will take care, okay, this was the error, so I must write the code in such a way this error is avoided, right? So you have in back of your mind that these were the errors which were identified, so I must write the code in such a way that this error does not come again, right? So this is what test first development is. So when you are trying to prevent the error, so ultimately when you compile the code at the end, once you have written it properly, the probability of errors will be less, and if the errors are less, maybe negligible or minimum, the quality will improve. So this is what test first development is, which is present here. Then refactoring is, I have told you, we have to refactor the code continuously. It leads to code improvement and it makes the code simple and maintainable as well as understandable. Then pair programming we have discussed. Developers work in pairs, checking each other's work and providing the support to do a good job, right? So they are evaluating the work at the same time, they are cooperating amongst them, and ultimately maybe they both are excellent in different area, so it will be a better outcome only. Collective ownership we have discussed, both are equally responsible for everything, whether it is correct or wrong. Continuous integration means you give one release, right? Another iteration you have to integrate with the previous one. You release it, then the third iteration starts. You have to integrate with the first two. Right? So continuous integration is also important here. Sustainable pace means you don't allow the people to work for long hours. They must work for an optimum number of hours in a way so that it is not going to impact their health. So the large amount of overtime are not considered acceptable, as the net effect is often to reduce code quality and the medium term productivity. So what happens if you are working for long hours and the deadline is approaching? You go for shortcuts, right? So ultimately the quality is going to degrade, productivity will decrease, efficiency will come down. So ultimately don't go for that. Sustainable basis required here. And on-site customer, that is important, that customer must be involved during the development. He must be part of the team. Then only you can develop using agile approach. Now what are requirement scenarios? I have told you the requirement scenarios are nothing. They are written in the form of stories on the cards. We call these requirements as user stories, which are broken down into tasks and subtasks based on schedule and the cost estimate. The customer chooses a story for inclusion in the next iteration based on their priorities and the schedule estimate. So customer is going to prioritize the requirements, right, in each cycle, and then you are going to develop it. Test first development, we have done it. Writing tests before code clarifies the requirement to be implemented. Tests are written as programs rather than the data so that they can be executed automatically. That means this is done with the help of the tools, automated testing, not manually, right? We have one of the testing tool is JUnit, which is generally used for Java. Like we have so many tools used in testing, like Selenium, which is again a Java based tool. We have QTP, Load Runner, right, Bugzilla, and all. So many tools are there. So we are considering JUnit here. All previous and new tests are run automatically when new functionality is added, thus checking that the new functionality has not introduced errors. So once a new iteration is released, you have to test the previous also, because when you're going to integrate, maybe it makes an error in the previous one also. So you have to run the test for each iteration that is being delivered or developed. Then pair programming we have seen. In XP, programmers work in pairs, sit together to develop the code. This helps develop common ownership of the code and spread knowledge across the team. It serves as an informal review process as each line of the code is looked by more than one person. It encourages refactoring as the whole team can benefit from this. Measurements suggest that development productivity with pair programming is similar to that of two people working independently. In pair programming, programmers sit together at the same workstation to develop the code, not on two distinct terminals. They are sitting on the one terminal itself. Pairs are created dynamically so that all team members work with each other during the development process. The sharing of knowledge that happens during pair programming is very important as it reduces the overall risk to a project when team members leave. So this is a major risk. Say one person leaves, so who is going to carry his work? If you go on making him understand the previous work, the time will be wasted and you have to deliver the iteration in 2 weeks. So ultimately when you're sharing the knowledge, this is what is happening in Agile daily. We used to share whatever work is being carried out so that everyone is aware of everything in the project. So if a person is sick or he leaves the company, the other person can carry forward his work very easily. Pair programming is not necessarily inefficient, and there is evidence that a pair working together is more efficient than two programmers working separately. So these are the few benefits or advantages. It supports the idea of collective ownership and responsibility. It acts as an informal review, and refactoring is there, the continuous software improvement is there. Thank you. So this was extreme programming. Go through it a bit, you can understand it's entirely different from the SDLC that we have done till now. So the approach is different, but more or less develop coding part is same. You have to code it, but customer will be throughout involved for giving you the. So you must have remembered I have told you in the lab session that the aeroplane example, we have done it using 3 cases. The case 1 was build and fix approach, the case 2 was SDLC, and the case 3 was Agile. So this was Agile. Customer is sitting along with you and he is giving you the requirements then and there. You're developing it and he's evaluating at the same time, right? So just compare with that. If any doubt, you can ask in the discussion session. Thank you.